I call the member for Maitland.
Thank you, Mr Temporary Speaker. And firstly, I'd like to congratulate the member for Blue Mountains for her extensive work in the area of domestic violence. From her very first speech in this place, she has worked diligently and effectively in raising awareness and calling for more action from the Baird-Grant Government on this issue. And she's worked on it as a community advocate, a member of Parliament, and also in her capacity as the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. The member for Blue Mountains has a constructive and inclusive manner, and she wants to work with women on this issue. And you can note that by the number of speakers who have been seeking to join her calls for more refuges. Contrast this with the minister who came down here last week and started heckling her during the debate. She refused to participate in the debate as second speaker. She provides a small target on this issue because she knows the government has got their priorities wrong. I say publicly, both in this chamber and outside, that the government's approach from a legislative and policing perspective has some good results. However, we have a long way to go when it comes to victim services. If the government was truly wanting to have a bipartisan approach, they could have potentially thought of supporting this motion, but of course they can't have that. Not even an amendment that would make it supportable for a government that cannot admit its mistakes. In its much-touted It Stops Here reforms of September 2014, the government promised a domestic and family violence framework for reform. It called for us to stand together to end domestic and family violence in New South Wales, noting staggering statistics such as 125,000 reports of domestic violence each year, and that 300,000 of further incidences go unreported, that 3/4 of female homicides are in a domestic nature, and that 1/3 of people seeking assistance from homelessness services in New South Wales identify domestic and family violence as an issue, and that Aboriginal women and children are 6 times more likely to be victims of domestic and family violence than non-Aboriginal women. The cost of domestic and family violence to the New South Wales economy is more than $4.5 billion annually. 18 months after promising bipartisan reforms which would have stopped domestic violence, the government has failed again and again to protect women. And even after the latest budget, we still have no coordinated or comprehensive time frame for the rollout of SAMs and safer pathways across this state. Rather, we have bitsy media opportunities which are done in a partisan and random manner. For instance, none of the local members were recently invited to the most recent announcement in the electorates of Newcastle and Port Stephens. I myself asked the Minister's office twice if I could get a copy of the media release so I could comment on these great announcements that the government was making. Because even though I'm generally supportive of any initiative that the government does in this pace, it's important to actually know what they're announcing. They refused that request on 3 separate occasions. Surely not bipartisan, and yet another example of the government treating the opposition and the community as accessories after the fact. It's not bipartisanship. So let me turn to what the government's doing. Importantly, they're still not funding refuges adequately, so women and children are being turned away every day from centres in this state, and importantly, they are still not putting victims at the centre of their policies as they promised to do. A central plank of the It Stops Here Safer Pathway reform was a referral of victim identified as facing a threat or serious threat of violence to a statewide central referral point, and this was to be done through the Women's Domestic Violence Court advocacies. Even these haven't been funded. We need beds in refuges for women in this state, and this government is failing to provide those services adequately, and I urge all members of this place to act in a truly bipartisan manner and support the members' bill.